Tell Me I'm Alive is the 9th studio album by the band All Time Low, a band that's been around for 20 years actually this year. Their first record, The Party Scene, did come out in 2005, but they have technically been active since 2003, so they're going strong for 20 years now. And they've even had a bit of a revitalization, you could say, in popularity, in relevance over the past few years or so. They've had certain songs that have done pretty well in terms of chart positions, streams, use on social media, becoming trends in some of those sites. And even though now in 2023 they're not quite as big and popping off quite as much as they were in 2020 or 2021, I would say that All Time Low is still one of the more popular bands to be played consistently on rock and pop radio stations, even if their time in the spotlight was a little short-lived, as it really is with most acts when they get big on certain social media sites, namely TikTok. Normally their time doesn't last that long. These guys have a new album out, so I'm talking about it obviously here in this video. I was intrigued. I wanted to see how it would sound. I'm not really a fan of this band per se. I have enjoyed some music from them though from time to time though, so I was, curious to see how this would turn out. As I am with any artist, any band, any music act, if I like anything that anyone has ever put out at a certain time, then I'm always going to be at least somewhat interested in what they come out with in the future. Oftentimes, said artists and said bands, said music acts don't really go on to create stuff that exactly tickles my fancy, but you do get those occasions from time to time, I do at least, where I do get really into an artist just from hearing a certain song from them, or maybe hearing a feature that they're on with another artist, and then I go into their discography and they become one of my favorite artists. I would say JPEG Mafia is a big example of that for me right now. But I gotta say, this right here is not the case for All Time Low with this new record right here, Tell Me I'm Alive. From top to bottom, this did not do it for me. From nearly every aspect of this album, every little thing you could pinpoint and rate and rank in any sort of fashion, I was just really underwhelmed by a lot of this album. I will say though, if I am just trying to be a little bit nice here for a second, there isn't a whole lot on here that is necessarily offensive. It is pretty inoffensive, I guess I would say, although there is one song I will get into that might be a little offensive to some people. For the most part, they do kind of play it safe with the subject matter here, with the music, the production, the different genres they explore. It's pretty by the numbers stuff, and the band performs okay. Alex's vocals are fine. You can listen to this album and think like, okay, it's they do just enough. And for some people, that is enough. They don't need something that is very thought-provoking or very experimental from a musical standpoint. But for someone like me who takes album listening experiences from an analytical approach, I got little to nothing out of the experience of spinning this album. And if I am to linger on that topic of the music here, of the way that the production was handled, it was kind of a generic mix of pop rock, pop punk, a little bit of alt rock here, I guess. Just nothing really that new or interesting for me. The one time I did hear something that was a little bit different and a little bit unique to the sound of this album was on the track The Sound of Letting Go. There's a fairly prominent synth part that accompanies the instrumental here. It reminded me a little bit of Died in Your Arms by Cutting Crew. But beyond that, there was basically nothing else on here that made me perk up or made me think, oh, that was kind of cool, that was kind of different. No, there's nothing else on here that isn't anything we've ever heard. And the lyrics on this album were a consistent letdown for me, talking about such generic topics. Alex with singing these lines with his whiny vocals, which, as I said, are okay. They get the job done, but I'm just not sold on it. I feel like he needs to sing these lines with more passion. You need to sell it, make me believe it. There are a few tracks on here, though, I think are worth noting, worth pointing out, that do have, well realized topics explored in them, whether I like them or not. They do have an obvious thing that they are about. The opening track, Tell Me I'm Alive, Alex is listing off all these things that he wants to try to do, and he says, let's do this, let's do that, kind of insinuating that it's with someone else, possibly a love interest. And there are these kind of courageous daredevil-like acts that he wants to do to remind himself that he is alive, kind of experiencing these near-death scenarios, which I think is actually okay. It's like, that's fine writing there. And I actually do really like the last 30 seconds or so of this track. It really speeds up a lot. The drums, I think, sound great, and this takes more of a traditional sort of old school pop punk sounds to close out the track that I really liked. I just wish it was longer. It's just a very brief moment, sadly. Calm Down is the big one on here, though, that I mentioned might upset some people. Alex is clearly taking this track from a political standpoint and talking about how he's freaking out about the state of the world. Don't tell me to calm down. It's freaking me out that you're not freaking out. But he's not really pointing out anything specific that is upsetting him about the state of the world. He's just saying, this isn't good. I'm upset about the world. This needs to be better. Nothing really particular that seems to be worrying him. And to add to that, he seems to be calling out a specific group of people with the line, thoughts and prayers, so what, who cares? And I have a problem with this line, not because it necessarily hits me personally. It's not like, oh, I feel like Alex is attacking me with this line. It's not that at all. It's nothing personal. It's just that he decides to attack this specific demographic of people without necessarily going into what he thinks they may be doing wrong, or what specific issues he thinks need to be resolved with the world, the political world. I hope I'm making sense here. I hope my viewpoint is making sense to you guys, but I just thought this song could have been written a lot better. I got real, talk the talk, but he can't walk the walk vibes from this one. Then we have the track New Religion later on, with the only feature on the album in Teddy Swims on this track. And this has, hands down, some of the most cringy, eye-roll-worthy lines in the entire album. Using religion and religious practices as a metaphor for the developments of a romantic relationship. That your sweat is my holy water, I drown in an ocean. Your hips are the only altar I fall to my knees thinking. It's been way too long since my last confession on your bedroom floor. You're my new religion. I mean, you get it. You get kind of what they're going at here. There really is just a lack of originality with this album that I could not help but think about, and repeatedly just think about and think to myself as I was listening to this thing. Even a very strikingly similar melody used on the track Sleepwalking, which is the lead single to this album, feels really reminiscent of the song Monsters that they came out with a few years ago. That is the album Tell Me I'm Alive. That is All Time Low's new album that they have out this year. I really didn't like this thing. I've been thinking about what I would rate it. I still honestly don't know exactly. Like right now, as I'm sitting recording this, looking into the camera, I don't know when I'm gonna rate this thing. I know I have to pretty soon though, because I'm kind of closing out the video here, but I don't really know what to give it. I did not like a single song on here. I thought it did a lot of things wrong, but it had just a couple of just small little moments that were kind of enjoyable for me, and some ideas that were decently explored. And as I said, the band does an okay job with their playing on this album, but unfortunately that wasn't enough to make it an enjoyable experience for me. And as of now, I would give this a 2 out of 10. What do you guys think of this album? If you have heard it, any thoughts on it? Any favorite tracks, least favorite tracks, possibly? How do you feel about the band All Time Low as a whole? Whatever you want to comment, feel free to comment. But as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video whenever that comes out. Peace out.